The private investigator's hands trembled noticeably as he handed me the medical report. It wasn't the usual shiver from cold. Rather, it was the tremor of a person whose understanding of good and evil had suddenly been turned upside down. Mr. Hayward, your wife wasn't just cheating on you, she was systematically destroying you. A blood test taken 3 years ago shows an off-the-charts level of arsenic in your system. And that, believe me, isn't even the worst of it, said Sterling Moss, a lanky man in a rumpled suit who had just entered the dingy diner where I spent my days over a cup of cheap coffee, which the kind-hearted waitress, Ruby, sometimes brought me for free. Just 3 weeks ago, I was Calvin Hayward, a respected businessman, owner of a thriving chain of hardware stores scattered across the state. Now, I was forced to sleep in my old pickup truck in the back lot of my first store, the very one my father and I had built with our own hands over 20 years ago. What could be worse than my wife trying to send me to the grave? I asked, though my voice sounded far calmer than I felt. Sterling pulled another document from his briefcase. His finger pointed to a name I didn't recognize, Dalton Creed. This man is her legal husband, and that marriage was registered back in 1998. It turns out, all your years together have been one big lie, Mr. Hayward. Every document she signed, every piece of property she claimed, every lawsuit. She was running a 15-year scam, culminating in your death and her enrichment by $5 million. It felt as though the coffee cup in my hand should have shattered from the tension. But I merely placed it carefully on the table, as I had done for the past 3 years, ever since the tremors began. Ever since Veronica started giving me those special protein shakes, supposedly to maintain my health. My name is Calvin Hayward. I'm 46 years old. Recently, on a rainy Tuesday, I buried my mother, Dorothy, in Millbrook, the town where I built my life, my business, my family, or what I naively believed was my family. My son, Brendan, had just turned 14. He was a tall, gangly teenager with a stubborn chin inherited from his grandfather. My daughter, Meredith, was 11. She was a quiet, observant girl with her grandmother's perceptive eyes, which seemed to miss nothing. They, my children, were the reason I kept silent when Veronica handed me divorce papers right at my mother's funeral. They were the reason I didn't cause a scene when she publicly declared at the graveside that she was claiming everything, the $15 million mansion my father left me, both country residences, half of my business, and full custody of the children. Your children deserve better than an alcoholic father who can barely stay conscious during business meetings, she announced loudly enough for my Uncle Frank and Aunt Peggy to hear. Loud enough for my brother Dennis and sister Joanna to turn away in shame. But I hadn't touched alcohol since Brendan was born. The dizziness, constant fatigue, instances where I passed out at Chamber of Commerce meetings or almost fainted while teaching Brendan how to use a circular saw in the workshop, all of it was caused by anything but alcohol. According to the report Sterling Moss had just laid before me, it was all the result of systematic arsenic poisoning, orchestrated by the woman who swore to love me in sickness and in health. How much time do I have left? I asked Sterling, because when you're told you've been poisoned for 3 years, that's the first thing that comes to mind. If you immediately stop ingesting the poison, the effects can be reversed with years, perhaps even decades of treatment. But Mr. Hayward, if she realizes her plot is exposed, she might accelerate her plan. I remembered Veronica in her black designer dress at the funeral, not shedding a single tear for the woman who welcomed her into our family, who gave her my grandmother's pearl necklace on our wedding day. I remembered Judge Harlan Westbrook, who ruled against me with such haste, as if he had written it before the hearing began. I thought of my children, living with the woman who was slowly killing their father, making them breakfast every morning. A morning full of unexpected revelations dawned. She hired you to follow me, he stated to Sterling, the private investigator whose profession was to gather incriminating evidence, to document reasons to deny me visitation with my children. Why are you revealing all this to me instead? Sterling Moss, a short, wiry man with tired eyes that spoke of long years observing others' secrets and deceptions, looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Hayward, I have a teenage daughter. And when I saw pictures of your children near the school, when I watched your son desperately try to call you from a payphone because his mother blocked your number, when I noticed your daughter's letters left near your store, hoping you would find them because she's forbidden to contact you directly, I couldn't continue. Some money isn't worth making, some clients aren't worth keeping. And some men, even those who have lost everything, sleeping in their trucks, still strive to be good fathers. Such men deserve the truth. Truth. A simple word, capable of destroying everything he knew about the last 15 years of his life. But sitting in that cheap diner, reviewing medical reports showing how close he was to death, he realized the truth wouldn't destroy him. The truth had just saved his life. Sterling handed another folder across the table. "There's more, Mr. Hayward. Your wife and Judge Westbrook have been in contact for several months. I have their text messages, meeting schedules, and proof of where your assets were supposed to go after your death. We can stop this, but we need to act fast. Your brother Dennis is a prosecutor in Seattle, isn't he?" He nodded, already dialing a phone number. "Excellent," Sterling said, "because what I'm about to show you will require someone who knows how to build an airtight case. Veronica Hayward, or rather Veronica Creed, made one mistake in her perfect plan. She kept the evidence, and I found it all." 3 months ago, he stood at Riverside Memorial Cemetery, watching his mother, Dorothy, being lowered into the ground. Cancer had taken her life swiftly, just 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. Doctors at Millbrook Hospital were astonished by the disease's aggressiveness. It seemed to consume her from within before treatment could even begin. His father, Raymond, had passed 5 years prior from a heart attack in his veterinary clinic, surrounded by the animals he had cared for 40 years. His mother never recovered from the loss. She had dedicated her life to being Mrs. Raymond Hayward, the wife of a respected veterinarian, baking pies for church fairs and never missing one of his baseball games as a child. The rain that October morning felt personal, as if the heavens had opened to match the heaviness in his chest. He stood in his black suit, the one Veronica had chosen for him at Nordstrom last year, insisting he needed to look successful for business. His children, Brendan and Meredith, clung to him on both sides. Brendan nervously adjusted his tie, a habit he had developed recently, and Meredith held his hand so tightly he could feel the tremor of her small fingers through his black gloves. His brother Dennis flew in from Seattle with his wife Patricia and their twins. He stood straight, with the prosecutor's posture even in grief, occasionally wiping his eyes behind his glasses. His sister Joanna quietly sobbed beside him, her husband Theo gently rubbing her back. Uncle Frank, his mother's younger brother, who owned a cattle ranch outside of town, squeezed his shoulder with his calloused farmer's hand. The entire town of Millbrook came to say goodbye. That's what happens when you own 3 thriving hardware stores that, at one point or another, employed half the town, when you sponsor every youth team in the county and support contractors through good times and bad. In those somber days, with loss heavy on his heart, Pastor Williams spoke of his mother's boundless devotion to the church. But Calvin's gaze was fixed on Veronica. She kept herself separate from the grieving family, maintaining what she considered a respectful distance, but in reality, only demonstrating emotional detachment. Her immaculate black Chanel dress seemed impervious to the whims of the rain, sheltered beneath a designer umbrella whose cost likely exceeded many people's monthly mortgage payment. Veronica glanced at her phone repeatedly, deftly typing with one manicured finger, as if mourning the passing of Calvin's mother. "Dorothy Hayward was a pillar of strength," Pastor Williams intoned. "Even in her final days, she cared more for others than for herself. Just last week, she called me to her side and said, 'Pastor, keep an eye on my Calvin. Something's not right with him, but he doesn't see it. A mother's heart knows.'" At the time, these words seemed strange to Calvin. In her last days, his mother was on massive doses of morphine, and her speech sometimes lost coherence. She spoke of seeing his father waiting for her, of invisible birds outside the window, of Veronica's smile never reaching her eyes. Everyone attributed it to delirium caused by cancer and medication-induced paranoia. Veronica never visited Calvin's mother during her 6 weeks in the hospital. There was always some excuse: a charity board meeting, an uncancelable yoga retreat, urgent book club affairs. "Your mother never truly loved me," she once remarked late one night, adjusting her face mask in the mirror of their luxurious marble bathroom. "I'd rather remember her healthy." But his mother did love Veronica, at least initially. 15 years ago, she welcomed her into the family with open arms, personally involved in planning the wedding down to the smallest detail. Only in the last 3 years had his mother grown quiet in her daughter-in-law's presence, observing her with such intensity that family dinners became tense affairs. It was also in those 3 years that Calvin began to experience strange seizures. "Calvin, we need to talk," Veronica said, barely a moment after the pastor finished the final prayer. The calculated timing made Calvin gasp. The crowd had begun to disperse but hadn't fully scattered, ensuring maximum witnesses. His mother's coffin hadn't even been lowered into the grave. "Can't this wait?" Calvin whispered, gesturing towards the grave where the cemetery workers respectfully paused, awaiting the ceremony's end. "Actually, no." She pulled an envelope from her designer handbag, the same Hermes one Calvin had given her for their anniversary when he still had free reign over his finances. "You've been served." Dennis, Calvin's brother, instantly stepped forward, recognizing legal documents from a distance. "Veronica, this is not the time for—" "This is exactly the right time," she interrupted, her voice echoing across the cemetery. "Everyone who matters is here to witness that Calvin has been properly notified. I demand the house, both country residences, half of all business assets, and full custody of Brendan and Meredith." Aunt Peggy gasped. Uncle Frank squeezed Calvin's shoulder tighter. Meredith began to cry, and Brendan hugged her, trying to shield his younger sister from what was happening. "On what grounds?" Dennis demanded, his voice taking on a prosecutor's edge. Veronica smiled, and in that moment, Calvin finally saw what his dying mother had seen. The smile was flawless, practiced, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Alcoholism, emotional neglect, and mental instability posing a threat to the children. I have documented proof of everything." The divorce papers felt heavier than the handful of earth Calvin had just thrown onto his mother's coffin. Veronica didn't wait for people to leave. She immediately made her demands. Standing under her designer umbrella, she transformed his mother's gravesite into a makeshift courtroom, her voice cutting through the rain with polished clarity. "I demand the house, both country residences, half of all your business assets, and full custody," she declared, loud enough for Aunt Peggy to gasp. "The children need a stable parent, not someone who works 80 hours a week and drinks himself into oblivion." "I don't drink," Calvin countered, stunned. The accusation was so absurd he couldn't comprehend it. "You know I haven't touched alcohol since Brendan was born." "Tell that to the judge. I have proof of your alcoholism, anger issues, and child neglect." She smiled. Yes, she actually smiled at his mother's grave while her body had not yet been committed to the earth. "My lawyer says with your history of erratic behavior and medical episodes, no court will entrust you with custody of the children." The battle for temporary custody escalated with frightening speed. The medical episodes and sudden dizziness, which began 3 years ago, like an ominous echo of their 12th anniversary in picturesque Napa Valley, marked the beginning of a nightmare. Unexplained fatigue, baffling doctors, led only to vague conjectures about stress, chronic fatigue syndrome, or early neurological issues. The tremor, causing him to drop tools at work, forced him to avoid electrical equipment, undermining his authority in the eyes of his colleagues. Veronica, it seemed, was brimming with concern, preparing protein shakes from organic ingredients ordered from exclusive health food stores. She introduced vitamins into his morning routine. Small white pills meant, she said, to boost his energy. "This is absurd." Dennis stepped forward, raindrops streaming down his glasses. "Veronica, Calvin built his business from scratch. He's never had a drinking problem. Everyone knows that." "Everyone only knows what Calvin wants them to know," Veronica countered, addressing the gathering as if they were an audience in a theater. "But no one sees him at home, passed out in his study. No one sees the empty bottles hidden in the garage. No one sees the children crying because Dad forgot to pick them up from school again." "That's a lie," Brendan shouted, his voice trembling with teenage anger. "Dad never forgot us. You changed the schedule and didn't tell him. You—" "Brendan, darling," Veronica's voice turned saccharine. "You're upset about Grandma. You don't understand what you're saying." Over the next 3 weeks, the world crumbled with astonishing speed, as if following a pre-written script. Lawyer Garrison Pike, with 30 years of experience in Millbrook, seemed bewildered by the onslaught from Veronica's Seattle legal team. The first hearing was scheduled just 5 days after the funeral. Judge Harlan Westbrook, a man he had never encountered despite 2 decades in the same town, displayed overt animosity from the start. "Your Honor," Garrison insisted, Mr. Hayward built his business from the ground up. He's provided jobs for 43 people in this town. He's a pillar of Millbrook. A pillar who apparently cannot stay conscious during important meetings, Veronica's lawyer, a legal shark named Harrison Cole, retorted acidly. He presented a 3-month-old video from a Chamber of Commerce presentation where Calvin nearly collapsed during his speech on supporting local businesses. This man operates heavy machinery, drives vehicles, and allegedly cares for children while in a clearly incapacitated state. The video was irrefutable evidence. Calvin watched himself on screen, clutching the podium convulsively, sweat pouring down his face, his words slurred not from alcohol, but from something he couldn't explain. 2 attendees rushed to catch him as he began to fall. "I was sick," he protested. "I had the flu that week." "According to medical records, you've had the flu 17 times in the last 2 years, Harrison Cole snapped, presenting documentation Calvin didn't even know existed. Or was it food poisoning or exhaustion? The excuses change, but the pattern remains the same. Calvin Hayward is unfit to raise children. Veronica testified for 2 hours, tears streaming down her face as she described her husband's deteriorating condition. She painted a picture of a man becoming increasingly erratic, paranoid, and aggressive. She claimed Calvin once accused her of poisoning him during one of his delusional states, and that she had lived in constant fear ever since. "He told me I was trying to kill him," she sobbed to the judge. "Can you imagine living with someone so paranoid? I was afraid for our children." Calvin had indeed uttered those words once, 6 months ago, after a particularly severe episode. He'd made a grim joke after vomiting for the 3rd time that week. "Are you trying to poison me?" he'd asked, trying to mask how unwell he felt with levity. She had laughed and kissed his forehead, telling him he needed more rest. Judge Westbrook awarded her everything in the temporary orders: the $15 million mansion his father left him, the house where Brendan took his first steps in the kitchen, where Meredith learned to read in the library, the lake house where Calvin taught both children to fish with the same rods his father taught him, the mountain cabin where they spent every Christmas until Veronica insisted on going to Aspen this year. In Aspen, at the epicenter of his personal disaster, the hero was given only 4 hours to pack under the watchful eye of the sheriff. Deputy Ronald Vance, a familiar face from school days, avoided eye contact as he watched Calvin hastily stuff his belongings into a duffel bag. "I'm truly sorry, Calvin," he mumbled. "This isn't fair." For 3 long weeks, his Ford pickup served as his home, parked behind the walls of his first store on Maple Street. Financial assets were frozen for valuation, and access to business accounts was blocked due to Veronica's unspecified accusations of financial impropriety. His meager diet consisted of only 1 meal a day at Ruby's Diner when funds allowed, and he had to shower at a truck stop outside of town. He struggled to comprehend how his life could have collapsed so rapidly. The children were told their father was undergoing treatment for his problems, and Veronica rushed them to a therapist specializing in parental alienation syndrome, though it seemed he was the victim of this alienation. Calls went unanswered, messages were blocked, and an attempt to attend Brendan's baseball game resulted in his expulsion by security guards, as Veronica had obtained a restraining order, claiming his instability and potential aggressiveness. Dennis persistently urged him to come to Seattle, offering shelter and support with Patricia to plan their next steps together. "Something's not right here," he insisted. "It's too coordinated, too flawless. Like a carefully planned operation." But Calvin couldn't leave Millbrook, sensing something was amiss. The timing of the divorce filing, coinciding with his mother's funeral, Judge Westbrook's blatant bias never having met him personally, and Veronica's certainty of an unconditional victory, all indicated she was acting not like a frightened woman, but like a puppet master who knew every move. On the 22nd day of his life in the truck, Sterling Moss knocked on his window, bringing answers he was completely unprepared for. One evening, as rain hammered on the roof of his temporary dwelling, a sharp rap on the glass roused him from a restless stupor in the driver's seat. Before him stood a lean man in a rumpled suit, clutching a folder to his chest as if protecting it from the downpour. He nervously scanned the empty parking lot behind the hardware store, as if expecting an ambush. "Calvin Hayward, I'm Sterling Moss, private investigator." His first reaction was anger. If Veronica sent you to harass me or gather dirt on my instability, you can tell her she's already taken everything. She hired me to follow you, to document any behavior that might threaten your visitation rights with your children, he admitted, shifting from foot to foot in the rain streaming from his thinning hair. But Mr. Hayward, I uncovered something that made me immediately cease my cooperation with her. Can we talk somewhere private? They met at Ruby's 24-hour diner on Highway 47, the only refuge in town where no one asked too many questions. Ruby herself, after casting a suspicious glance at Sterling, brought coffee without being asked, before returning to the kitchen. The diner was empty, save for a trucker devouring pie at the counter. Sterling laid out the documents on the cracked table with the precision of a lawyer presenting evidence in court. Your wife has been purchasing arsenic-based rat poison in small quantities from various stores for 3 years, he revealed in a hushed voice. Always with cash, always in a disguise meant to conceal her identity, baseball caps, sunglasses, wigs, but surveillance cameras don't lie. Mr. Hayward, I matched her facial features, her gait, and even the way she carries her purse on her left shoulder. He handed over printouts from surveillance cameras, Veronica at a hardware store in Riverside, 40 miles away, Veronica at a farm supply store in Bakersfield, Veronica at a grocery store in Milltown. Different hairstyles, different clothes, but invariably his wife, buying rat poison. The dates indicated a period 3 years ago, right after their anniversary in Napa Valley. But that's not all, Sterling continued, pulling out a new stack of photos. This man she meets at the Riverside Motel every Thursday when she tells you she's attending her book club. His name is Dalton Creed. In the photograph presented by Private Detective Sterling, Veronica was tenderly embracing a distinguished man with silver hair, clad in an expensive suit. In one shot, they were sharing a passionate kiss. In another, they were entering a modest motel room. A surge rose within him, yet it wasn't jealousy. Something about the man's appearance felt eerily familiar. Are they having an affair? He asked, though intuition suggested this was merely the tip of the iceberg. Sterling shook his head negatively. Mr. Hayward, Dalton Creed is not just a lover. He is her legal husband. To corroborate his words, he presented a marriage certificate issued in Clark County, Nevada, dated August 15, 1998. She never filed for divorce. Your marriage to her is legally invalid. You were never truly married. The sound of the coffee cup being placed on the saucer echoed in the silence. 15 years of shared life, 2 children. Everything they had built together was founded on a lie, which was simply inconceivable. I also found this, Sterling continued, handing over bank statements. For 3 years, she has been transferring money into an account opened in the Cayman Islands. Small sums, subtly siphoned from your joint accounts, totaling approximately $2 million. The account belongs to her and Dalton Creed. Why are you telling me this? He blurted out. She's paying you. Sterling looked him straight in the eyes. The gaze of this lean man, who had seen much in his career, was filled with determination. I have a daughter, Mr. Hayward. She's 15, almost the same age as your son. When I saw pictures of your children at school, when I watched your son trying to call you from a payphone near the store because his mother blocked your number on his phone, when I saw your daughter leaving letters at your store door, hoping you would find them because she's forbidden to contact you directly, I couldn't continue. Some money isn't worth earning. Sterling pulled out another folder, filled with medical documents. I have a friend who works in a lab. He analyzed some items from your house. Items Veronica didn't suspect I collected, supposedly while investigating your case. Your protein powder has arsenic mixed in, as do those special vitamins she gave you. The doses were carefully calculated, Mr. Hayward, enough to cause illness, to create symptoms that would make you appear unstable and unreliable, but not enough to kill you quickly. She was slowly poisoning you, building a medical history that would support her claims in the divorce proceedings. He recalled every morning of the past 3 years, Veronica bringing a protein shake with a gentle kiss on his cheek. Drink up, darling. There are extra vitamins for energy. Her watchful gaze, not leaving him until he drank every last drop. We need blood samples from the last 3 years, he said, his mind suddenly clear despite the shocking revelations. Were there any doctor visits where blood was drawn? A medical exam for insurance, he suddenly remembered. Veronica insisted on taking out a new $1 million policy 3 years ago, said it was important for the children's future. A full blood panel was done then. Sterling nodded. I've already requested those records. The arsenic level from 3 years ago shows the poisoning had just begun. If we can analyze your current levels and compare them, we'll have irrefutable medical evidence of systematic poisoning. He immediately called Dennis. It was well past midnight in Seattle, but he answered on the second ring, as if he had been waiting for him. Dennis, listen carefully, he said. I'm at Ruby's diner with a private detective. Veronica has been poisoning me with arsenic for 3 years, and she's married to another man. There was silence on the other end. Then Dennis's prosecutor's voice spoke. Don't move. Don't go anywhere alone. I'm on the first flight. Calvin, we need to document everything immediately. If she finds out, she might try to accelerate her plan or destroy the evidence. Sterling leaned forward and reported. There's another important point, Mr. Hayward. I've obtained text messages exchanged between Veronica and Judge Westbrook. Apparently, they've been hatching this plan for several months. According to their correspondence, the judge was to receive a share of your inheritance after your demise, which they calculated should occur within a year. Hayward asked in astonishment, How did you get access to their text messages? Sterling explained, Veronica provided me access to her phone records to help document your alleged harassment. She apparently didn't realize that access was two-way. Sterling pulled out printed transcripts of the correspondence. She's not very tech-savvy, nor is the judge. One message from Veronica to Judge Westbrook was particularly striking. Once Calvin dies from his alcoholism, we'll split everything 3 ways, you, me, and Dalton. The kids will get nothing, thanks to the will I made him sign last year when he was barely conscious from the poisoning. Hayward remembered that fateful day. I was so sick I could barely hold a pen. Veronica convinced me it was just updating beneficiary information for insurance purposes. Sterling emphasized the need for immediate action. We need to act without delay. I've made copies of all materials, one for you, one for your brother, and another is in a safe deposit box at First National Bank in my name. In case something happens to any of us, Ruby has instructions to deliver the key to the FBI field office in the state capitol. Ruby, appearing with another cup of coffee, nodded approvingly at Sterling. It's about time someone helped Calvin. I never liked that wife of his. Too perfect, too polished, and the way she watched him eat when they came here, as if studying him, gave me an uneasy feeling. Sitting in the diner, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy to murder him, Hayward felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in 3 years. The fog that had clouded his mind, the exhaustion that had oppressed him, the tremor that made him doubt himself, all had an explanation. He wasn't going crazy, wasn't an alcoholic, and wasn't a bad father. He was the victim of systematic poisoning by the one he trusted most, and now he had the evidence to fight back. The courtroom was packed. Rumors had spread through Millbrook like wildfire that Calvin Hayward had initiated an emergency hearing, presenting evidence of attempted murder. Veronica, accompanied by her lawyer Harrison Cole, continued to play the role of the aggrieved spouse, displaying the pearl necklace given to her by Hayward's mother on their wedding day. The pearls, belonging to his grandmother and passed down through generations, now adorned the neck of the woman who was slowly killing him. Presiding was Judge Patricia Thornfield, a stern woman from the state capitol whom Dennis had managed to secure after filing a complaint against Judge Westbrook's misconduct. Westbrook himself was present in the courtroom, trying to maintain his composure, but sweat treacherously seeped through the fabric of his expensive suit. Your Honor, Dennis began, taking on Hayward's legal representation with prosecutorial precision. We have evidence of attempted murder, bigamy, fraud, and a conspiracy involving the defendant Veronica Hayward, who is, in fact, Veronica Creed, and which extends to members of the judiciary in this county. Veronica's lawyer sprang to his feet. This is outrageous, Your Honor. Mr. Hayward is clearly suffering a nervous breakdown, making absurd accusations. Sit down, Mr. Cole, Judge Thornfield commanded. I have reviewed the preliminary evidence. We will proceed. Sterling Moss was the first to testify, methodically and meticulously detailing his investigation. He presented surveillance footage from 17 different stores, showing Veronica purchasing rat poison over 3 years. Each purchase was small, inconspicuous, paid for in cash, but collectively they amounted to enough arsenic to take several lives. The purchases followed a pattern, Sterling explained, pointing to a chart. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, at stores within a 50-mile radius, but never at the same store twice within 6 months. This demonstrates premeditation and meticulous planning. In the courtroom, truly damning evidence was presented, a marriage certificate. Attorney Dennis delivered it with a theatrical flourish that, nevertheless, left no doubt as to its authenticity. Veronica Summers married Dalton Creed in Las Vegas on August 15, 1998. No divorce was ever filed between them. Therefore, her marriage to my client, solemnized on June 20, 2009, is legally null and void. She committed bigamy for 15 years. His voice boomed. "This is absurd," Veronica exclaimed, her composure showing its first crack. "I divorced Dalton back in 2000. Judge Thornfield calmly countered, "In that case, I ask that you provide the court with the divorce decree." Veronica turned to her lawyer in a panic, whispering frantically. Harrison Cole, who had moments ago exuded confidence, now nervously shuffled papers, futilely trying to find a way out of the situation. "We will need time to locate those documents, Your Honor," he mumbled. "You do not have that time, Mr. Cole," the judge cut him off. "At our request, records were checked in all 50 states. No divorce documents exist." Next, the results of the toxicology report were presented in court. Dr. Marcus Flint, a leading specialist at the state toxicology lab, conducted a comparative analysis of Hayward's blood samples, taken 3 years ago for health insurance purposes, with current samples. Additionally, he examined the protein powder and vitamins seized from Hayward's home by Detective Sterling. Mr. Hayward systematically ingested approximately 0.5 milligallons of arsenic daily for 3 years, Dr. Flint stated. The dosage was calculated with diabolical precision. It was sufficient to induce a range of severe symptoms: tremor, general weakness, cognitive impairment, episodic paralysis, yet insufficient to cause acute poisoning that would be easily diagnosed. This is known as chronic arsenicosis. It cleverly mimics many other diseases, making its detection virtually impossible without specialized tests. And what would have been the consequences if Mr. Hayward had continued to ingest arsenic at the same doses? Attorney Dennis inquired. Within a year, and possibly sooner, came the reply. Vital organ failure would have occurred, leading to death. It would have appeared as a natural demise, perhaps liver failure, which could have been attributed to alcohol abuse, given the documented medical history. But the real bombshell dropped when Detective Sterling presented another finding to the court. Mr. Creed owns a company called Wellness Solutions Inc., Sterling explained, displaying the relevant corporate documents. The company manufactures dietary supplements. Specifically, they developed a special blend for Mrs. Creed that contained microdoses of arsenic, designed to mimic chronic fatigue syndrome and neurological disorders. Here are the documents confirming the delivery of this blend to the Haywards' home. "This is monstrous slander," Veronica sprang up again. "I would never—" "Is that why you took out a $5 million life insurance policy on your husband without his knowledge?" Dennis interrupted her, presenting the relevant documents to the court. "By forging his signature and naming yourself as the sole beneficiary, a policy that pays out even in cases of suicide if Mr. Hayward were to die from complications caused by alcoholism." A murmur of indignation rose in the courtroom. Judge Thornfield hammered her gavel, calling for order. "But that's not all," Sterling said quietly, and a chilling silence fell over the room. Mrs. Creed was not acting alone. He presented the court with printouts of phone calls and text messages between Veronica Creed and Judge Harlan Westbrook. These messages discussed in detail the plans for the divorce proceedings, strategies on how to strip Hayward of all his property and portray him in such a light that no one would believe him if he suspected anything. Dennis read one of the messages aloud. From Veronica Creed to Judge Westbrook, dated 2 weeks before the divorce filing. "Once Calvin dies from his drinking, we'll split everything 3 ways, you, me, and Dalton. The children will get nothing thanks to the will I made him sign last year when he was barely conscious from the poisoning." Another message from Westbrook to Veronica. "The restraining order is ready to sign as soon as you file. I'll make sure he can't even get near the children. No one will listen to a crazy alcoholic deadbeat dad." Tension filled the courtroom as Judge Westbrook, who had previously occupied a seat on the bench, found himself in the position of an ordinary spectator. His attempt to leave the room was thwarted by two bailiffs, acting under Judge Thornfield's direction. Attorney Harrison Cole, realizing the gravity of the situation, declared his inability to continue representing Veronica, emphasizing his unawareness of her misdeeds. At this moment, Veronica's mask finally fell. With a wild look, she turned to Calvin, her voice full of fury and frustration. She confessed to the years-long attempt at poisoning, to the carefully calibrated doses meant to lead to his death. Veronica made no secret of her irritation that Calvin continued to live despite her efforts. She spoke with contempt about her role as a caring wife, feigning concern during his episodes, which were caused by her own actions. Her laughter, echoing in the courtroom, filled the attendees with horror. Veronica recounted the plan devised with Dalton, which was to portray Calvin as a drunkard, strip him of everything in the divorce, and leave him to die alone. The court stenographer, without losing a second, recorded every word, her fingers rapidly typing. For the first time during the entire hearing, Calvin rose from his seat and asked the question that tormented him. "And my mother? Did you kill her too?" Veronica's smile grew even more sinister. She admitted that Dorothy had begun to suspect something was wrong, asked questions about Calvin's health, and watched him prepare his shakes. Veronica cynically declared that Dorothy's cancer was a convenient coincidence, but she made sure to prevent them from having any private conversations in her final weeks. Judge Thornfield, having heard Veronica's confessions, ordered the arrest of Mrs. Creed and Judge Westbrook. Calvin was immediately issued a restraining order, prohibiting Veronica from approaching him or his children. All of Judge Westbrook's previous rulings were overturned, Calvin's assets were unfrozen, property was returned, and he was granted full custody of his minor children. Under escort, Veronica hurled a final remark. "The children know Calvin. They knew for months that Mommy was making Daddy sick, but they were too scared to say anything because I told them the court would take them away forever if they lived with him." These words struck Calvin harder than any physical pain. The realization that his children had lived with this knowledge, carried this burden alone, while he was unable to protect them, was unbearable. But now they were safe, and he was alive to fight for them, despite 3 years of systematic poisoning. The courtroom began to empty, but many townspeople approached Calvin to express their apologies for believing Veronica's lies. Some confessed they had suspected something was amiss but didn't know what to do. Ruby, the diner owner, hugged Calvin and whispered that she knew from the first glance that Veronica was a poisonous woman. Dennis, squeezing Calvin's shoulder, stated, "It's over, Calvin. You won." But Calvin was already thinking of Brendan and Meredith, of the conversation ahead, and the healing process that needed to begin. The victory felt hollow, knowing his children had suffered in silence, but now they had a chance to start anew. Veronica and Dalton received 25 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. Judge Westbrook was sentenced to 15 years and disbarred, his reputation destroyed overnight. Calvin and Veronica's marriage was annulled as it was invalid from the start. Calvin got his children back, his property, and most importantly, his health. The effects of arsenic poisoning proved reversible thanks to timely treatment. Dr. Flint immediately began chelation therapy, and within weeks, the tremor began to subside. The fog that had clouded Calvin's mind for 3 years lifted like morning mist under the sun's rays. The sun broke through the clouds as if offering hope after a long darkness, but true clarity came with Brendan and Meredith's return home. In the living room, which had almost become my tomb, where Veronica daily offered me poisoned concoctions, we gathered together. The furniture had to be replaced. I couldn't bear to see the sofa where I used to lose consciousness, where she, pretending to be a caring wife, slowly took my life. "We sensed something was wrong, Dad," Brendan said, his 14-year-old voice sounding confident, but his hands betrayed his nervousness. "Mom made your special shakes, and then she'd washed the blender 3 times with bleach. She said it was because of your allergies, but it seems strange because she never washed our dishes that carefully." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, trying not to blame them. "She said if we told anyone about the shakes, the court would take us away forever," Meredith explained, seeking comfort in my embrace, just like when she was little. "She scared us with stories about children separated from their families and sent to foster homes." My heart broke at the thought of the fear my children lived with, watching their mother poison their father, intimidated into silence by her. We tried not to drink the orange juice she gave us after we saw her adding powder to yours, Brendan confessed. We'd pour it out when she wasn't looking, or pretend to drink it. We didn't know what else to do. My children, unprotected, had protected themselves. They witnessed my slow intoxication and found ways to survive. 2 children, living a nightmare, managed to maintain good grades at school and pretend everything was normal. Sterling Moss, the private investigator who abandoned a lucrative case out of conscience, became our friend. He now heads an agency specializing in domestic abuse cases with suspected poisoning. He revealed that he had uncovered 7 similar cases in the past year. It's more common than people think, he remarked one evening at dinner. Slow poisoning is the perfect crime if no one suspects. The victim looks crazy, unreliable, sick. Who would believe a slurring man claiming his wife is trying to kill him? Uncle Frank, who supported me at Mom's funeral, shared words with me that had haunted him. Dorothy felt something was wrong. A week before she died, she made me promise to look after you. She said, "Frank, Veronica smiles with her lips, but not her eyes. She's dangerous, and Calvin doesn't see it. Love blinds us, preventing us from seeing people's true nature." Even dying of cancer, Mom sensed the danger I had overlooked. Her intuition, honed over years of observation, caught what I missed. Dennis moved his family from Seattle to help me with the business during my recovery. The hardware stores suffered during my illness, but the community rallied around us once the truth came out. Sales soared by 40% in the first month after the trial. People wanted to support us. "You gave us jobs when we needed them," old Tom Brennan said, buying items he didn't need. "Now it's our turn to help you." Joanna and her children come for dinner every Sunday. The house, which nearly became my grave, is now filled with true family, genuine laughter, and unfeigned love. We cook together, not allowing anyone sole control over the food. Everyone contributes something to the meal. This has become our tradition, a way to reclaim what Veronica tried to destroy. Sometimes clients, remembering the newspaper headlines, ask how I could have missed the signs of poisoning. How could one not know they're being poisoned for 3 years? The answer is simple. When a loved one hands you a glass of water, you don't check it for poison, you simply drink. When your wife brings breakfast in bed, you don't look for arsenic, you say thank you. When the mother of your children says she's worried about your health, you believe her. Trust is not foolishness, it's an act of humanity. The abuse of trust doesn't make it flawed, it only exposes the evildoer. Now I know that evil doesn't always manifest in overt cruelty. Sometimes it smiles over morning coffee, kisses goodbye at the door, declares love while measuring death in milligrams. Sometimes it wears your grandmother's pearls and stands beside you at your mother's funeral, planning your destruction. Triumph over destruction. 6 months after Veronica's arrest, the debilitating tremor subsided. The fatigue, like a nightmare, gradually dissipated, replaced by daily surging energy. However, the medical report Sterling handed me that fateful night in the roadside diner is still kept as irrefutable proof. The person entrusted with love and care methodically, with diabolical patience, tried to take a life. This is not a symbol of victimhood, but a manifesto of survival. Against all ominous portents, against 3 years of poisoning, against a conspiracy rooted in the very courtroom, justice prevailed. Broken trust leaves indelible scars on the heart. But these scars are a reminder of what was endured, of victory over darkness. In the life of a hardware store owner, survival is just another project, requiring damage assessment, tool selection, and rebuilding to emerge stronger than before. It's the ability to distinguish materials that can withstand trials from those that crumble under pressure. It's knowing who the true team members are and who are the saboteurs undermining the foundation. My mother was not destined to see justice, but I'm certain she sees everything. For even on her deathbed, through a haze of morphine, she tried to warn me. A mother's heart always senses danger looming over her children, even if those children are 46 and believe they have mastered all of life's wisdom. Now, visiting her grave, bringing fresh flowers, I only share good news. The children are safe, the family business thrives, and her main lesson has been learned. If a person shows you their true colors, believe them immediately. The gravestone next to hers is empty, the spot Veronica meticulously chose, next to the woman to whom she handed divorce papers at her funeral, whose pearls she wore while plotting murder. The calculation was flawless, except for one detail: the victim would survive and learn the truth. The children are seeing a therapist to heal their emotional wounds, but they are also learning what true strength means, what it means to persevere, what true family is. Brendan dreams of becoming a prosecutor, like Uncle Dennis, and Meredith a detective, like Sterling, to help those who don't see impending danger. Recently, Meredith asked, "Dad, will you ever trust someone enough to marry again?" After a long pause, the answer came, "Trust isn't a guarantee against betrayal, but confidence in your own strength to survive it. It's choosing to remain open, even after the pain. Otherwise, Veronica wins, and her poison continues to work, even after it leaves the body." The $15 million mansion stands tall, no longer a symbol of deceit, but a monument to triumph over evil. Every room where the poisoning occurred has been rebuilt, repainted, filled with bright memories. The kitchen where death was prepared now serves as a place for family dinners. The bedroom where I so often lost consciousness has become an oasis of peaceful sleep, free from fear. Dalton Creed's company, Wellness Solutions Inc., ceased to exist after evidence of other suspicious blends, intended for the spouses of wealthy individuals, was discovered. 3 more cases of insidious poisoning, carried out using a similar scheme, came to light. All 3 victims survived thanks to the widespread publicity of the first case. Sometimes the question arises, what would have happened if Sterling Moss hadn't knocked on the truck window that night? If his conscience hadn't outweighed his greed, if he hadn't seen the reflection of his own daughter in the children's eyes? One person's decision to act conscientiously saved not only a life, but quite possibly other lives as well. This is a lesson I will always remember. Evil can be patient and calculating, but good exists, sometimes in the most unexpected places, in private investigators who prioritize moral principles over money, in small-town diners where waitresses keep secrets and offer refuge, in brothers willing to do anything for justice, in children brave enough to protect themselves when adults fail them. All that remains is to live, knowing the children are safe, the truth has triumphed, and every morning I can make my own breakfast, pour my own coffee, and taste the freedom in every poison-free sip.